Okay, so I'm just going to go through making a Debian virtual machine web server, so Apache web server. So I'm going to make in Oracle VirtualBox a new virtual machine, and I'm going to call it Debian or Debian, as some people like to say. And I'm going to choose the ISO for Debian or Debian that I downloaded earlier. I'll post the link for that in the announcements. And I'm going to leave the folder as default, but you might choose to put it on a USB drive, a USB solid state drive or something. I want to skip the unattended installation. It doesn't need a lot of grunt, but I've got a bit to play with. So I'm going to go with 2 CPUs and 4 gig of RAM. And the hard disk, you can make it as big as you like. It'll only occupy that space if you fill your server up with that much data. So it's quite safe to make it 2 terabytes because it'll only use the space that's actually really filling up with data for. Then we can click finish. And I'm going to go into the settings and the network settings, and I'm going to make another adapter, and that one's going to be a host-only adapter, which will work on a Wi-Fi network. If you've got a wired network, you might choose bridged, and that will get your network adapter on your local subnet. But if you're on a Wi-Fi network, then I do suggest host-only. Then I'll hit the start button. And I'm going to choose the graphical install. And I'll just make this window a little bit bigger. I'm going to choose English as the language. My location is Australia. I've got an American English keyboard. I'm going to leave the default network adapter as the primary adapter. My host name can be Debian or Debian. Domain name can be blank. Just don't forget your password. Being a virtual machine, we probably aren't really intense about security because we're probably going to throw it away eventually. But if you're setting up a real server, you might choose something fairly secure. So just with your username, you might want to make it your name just to make it easy. You're probably in Victoria. We can just select continue there. I suggest not choosing the encryption. When you choose encryption with Debian, it overwrites all the data on the disk, and if you've made it 2 terabytes, it'll overwrite all 2 terabytes. So if you're doing an encrypted disk with Debian, you choose like as small as possible generally. We can go with all files in one partition, or you can choose a separate one if you like, but it's not necessary for what we're doing. And finally, we can finish partitioning and write changes to disk. So the disk is just a file. So it's a virtual disk, which is just a file, a VDI file. So it tends to download the latest files off the internet during the installation. So once it's installed, it should be fully up to date. We don't need to scan for extra media, so just no on that one. And the package manager in Australia sounds good. It's a bit of a lucky dip which one you choose. Occasionally you have bad luck and get one which isn't working, but most of the time it works. We can leave the proxy blank. The survey, it doesn't really matter if you choose yes or no there. Now this screen is important. The first step is to untick or unselect everything. And then you just want to select the web server and the SSH server. That's all we want. And then it's continue. So we want to install Grub on the primary drive. So we say yes to that one, and we choose the SDA partition. So the Grub is a bootloader. It's a little program which gets us booted into the operating system. If you have multiple operating systems, you can have Grub, gives you a menu with multiple ones with multiple options. And now we can reboot. And we should be able to log in as the root user. And we can check out our IP addresses with IP space A. And I need to set up the secondary network adapter. So we can use the program Nano, which is a fairly easy to use text editor. And we look in the etc folder, in the network folder, and then the interfaces file. So Nano is going to open the interfaces file in that directory path. Then we can scroll to the bottom of that file and we might say the secondary network interface, and we want to allow hot plug, and it's going to be npos8, np0s8. So the 0 is the number 0. And I'll just fix my spelling. So the interface is npos8, and we can set it up for DHCP. Now, if it was a real server, we'd be setting up a static address, but we're just, this is just a practice server, so we can just get an address dynamically. You can Google how to set up a static address, and I'll post some information of that as well. But for the time being, a dynamic address will do the job for what we're doing for this project. Control S to save the changes, Control X to exit the file. And now we also want to take ownership of the web server folder. So we can use the command own for change owner, -R. That means we're going to recursively change the web server folder, which is var www HTML. So it's the HTML folder in the www folder in the var folder. And the -R means we're going to change the owner to Harley, me, or would be your username for you, for the HTML folder and everything in it and all subdirectories. So that's going to make me the owner of that folder or directory. Then we use change mod -R again. So all the subdirectories, 755. So the first 7 is for the user, me. The 5 is for the group that I'm in. And the last 5 is for the rest of the world. And 7 is 111 in binary. And basically we've got read, yes, write, yes, execute, yes, for me. So I can read, write, and execute everything in the web folder. The 5s are read, yes, write, no, execute, yes. So everyone except for me cannot write to the HTML directory. So in other words, I'm the only user, apart from the root user, that can modify the contents of the HTML directory. The rest of the world can't do it, theoretically. Once we've done that, pretty much the quickest option now is just to do a reboot. And that will make all the changes take effect. Now what we can do is we can start a remote connection to the Debian or Debian machine. So for that, I'm going to use the command prompt in Windows. And I do need to know my IP address. So I'll just log in and run the IPA again. And my IP address is down the bottom there, 192.168.56.111. So now I should be able to SSH Harley, which you'll have to change that to your username, at the IP address. And if all goes well, taking a long time. Why is it taking so long? Why did that not work? Let's try it again. Okay, I don't know. It's working second time. Not sure what happened the first time. We'll say yes to the continue connecting with that key fingerprint. And then ask for my password. And now I've got a remote connection from Windows to the Debian machine. Now, what I want to do is I want to get into that HTML directory and have a look what's in there. And there's an index page in there, which let's just have a look at that. So if I go to that page, I get the Apache Debian default page. Now, what we really want to see, though, is our website. So I'm going to rename that file with the move command. That's the mv command. And I'm going to move it to olds.html. So moving the file to a new name renames it. And now I've got olds.html. Now, on a new command prompt, I'm going to change into in Windows, I'm going to change into my USB drive. And then I'm going to change directory into where my web site is. There's a bit of other junk in my website folder, but it's got my website files and some other bits and pieces. Once I'm in my web folder on my Windows machine, then I'm going to start an SFTP connection to me at the Debian web server, if I can remember the IP address. So it's like the SSH connection, and we're using the same SSH server, but we're making an SFTP connection. And now I need to change into the web server directory again, var www.html. There's my olds.html. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a command, put -r for recursive dot. So put -r dot, that's going to take all the folders from the Windows directory and put them into the directory I'm in on the Debian machine. And there's my website and a bit of other bits and pieces, but it'll work for what we're doing here. And now when I go back to my browser, now I get my Peru web page running from the Debian server. And the photos page didn't load. That's because I just recently played with some XHTML. But there it is. Okay. So that's it. That's a Debian web server running on a virtual machine. And how to transfer the files with SFTP.